Welcome back to Broken Vows Chronicles, where betrayal meets justice and silence turns into revenge. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Tonight's story begins not on the ground, but in the skies. It's the story of Elena, a young woman who thought her first flight to New York as a flight attendant would change her life forever. And it did. But not in the way she dreamed. Buckle up. Because this flight isn't just about turbulence in the air. It's about betrayal, secrets, and a revenge no one saw coming. I was 24 when the sky finally opened its doors to me. The crisp navy uniform itched against my skin. The silver wings on my lapel gleamed like they'd been waiting for me all along, and my mother's voice echoed in the back of my mind. One day, Elena, you'll fly above all of this. She hadn't lived long enough to see me here, standing at gate B14 with trembling hands and a heart that refused to slow down. It was my first real assignment as a flight attendant. My first flight to New York. My first chance to prove I belonged among the polished smiles and steady voices that made the impossible look easy. The passengers gathered, an orchestra of impatience. Businessmen scrolling furiously on phones, families juggling bags and snacks, a toddler melting down in stereo. I adjusted my jacket and forced my lips into the smile they trained us to wear. That's when I met her. New girl? The voice was lacquered in sugar and sharpened with steel. Vanessa. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, immaculate, with the kind of confidence that didn't walk, it prowled. The senior attendant on this flight, with over a decade of experience, and a reputation whispered about during training. She made turbulence look like ballet. She also made rookies like me feel like gum on her heel. You, Elena? She asked, eyes flicking down to my badge and back up. Yes, I said. Her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Galley's yours. No spills, no rattles. And if I tell you to swap a service order to please a mileage brat in 2A, you do it before he knows he wants it. Yes, ma'am, I said automatically. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. Save the ma'am for first class. And just like that, my stomach knotted tighter. The captain swaggered up next, Mark Fleming, every inch the charming pilot, with a jaw built for billboards and a grin that could melt butter at 30,000 feet. Ladies, he said, tipping an invisible hat. You ready to make some dreams come true? Vanessa purred something, back, her hand brushing his sleeve like it had every right to be there. I filed it away under things I should probably remember. Then there was Riley, the first officer. Quieter, kinder. He didn't scan me like a threat or a toy the way the others did. He just nodded, like we were both humans about to climb into the same sky. Boarding began. And suddenly I was in the storm, scanning tickets, directing people, answering questions. By the time the last passenger filed on, my cheeks ached from smiling, my voice had cracked once, and my nerves were frayed. But then I saw him, a man in a camel-colored coat, silver tie pin catching the light. He moved with the kind of certainty that didn't come from confidence, but from knowing the world bent around him. At the jet bridge, he slipped Vanessa a folded paper menu, too carefully folded. Their hands lingered together a beat too long. I saw the flash of green tucked inside. Cash. My throat tightened. Vanessa tucked it into her jacket and smiled like nothing had happened. But when her gaze slid to me, it was sharp enough to slice. See nothing, it said. Learn fast, rookie. I tried. God, I tried. We pushed back, taxi, takeoff. The engines roared like wild animals and the ground fell away. For the first time in my life, I was part of the sky. But the sky, I was learning, had its own secrets. Service began, and Vanessa was flawless, floating down the aisle like she owned it. I fumbled, but I kept moving, kept smiling, kept quiet, until turbulence hit. It was small at first. Just a shimmy, a reminder that the air was alive. But then the plane dropped, just enough to make passengers yelp, just enough to send my service cart rattling. I braced it with my body, heart hammering. When the air smoothed, I ducked into the galley to reset. My sleeve brushed against a catering box on the lower shelf. Too heavy. Too solid. A corner was pried open and poorly resealed. I glimpsed a sliver of something black. Velvet. Before I could look closer, Vanessa appeared out of nowhere. Her smile was all teeth. "Lose something?" she asked, tapping the box with a manicured nail. "Inventory stays sealed until JFK. My face burned. "Of course." Her eyes lingered. Then she handed me a coffee cup. "Take this to the captain." "Black. No lid. Don't spill." I carried it into the cockpit where the world was bathed in the glow of instruments. Mark took it without looking at me. Riley gave me a small, almost protective smile. "Everything okay back there?" he asked softly. "Passengers are lively," I managed. "Passengers remember turbulence longer than kindness," Mark quipped, grinning at his screens. I smiled, retreated, and shut the door on their sanctuary. When I returned, the catering box was gone, and in its place, on the counter, lay a cocktail napkin, scribbled with numbers. Not a phone number. A sequence. I froze. "Elena." Vanessa's voice slid around the corner like oil. She plucked the napkin away and tucked it into her pocket, her smile daring me to ask. I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I went back to serving passengers, my hands trembling with every cup. It was my first flight to New York, the dream I'd carried since childhood. But already the cracks were showing, and then just before descent my phone buzzed in my pocket. Against policy, against sense, I checked it. A message from David, my fiancé. "Call later. Busy," and one more. From an unknown number. "Stay out of it." My blood ran cold. This was supposed to be the flight that changed my life, and maybe it still would, but not in the way I ever imagined. Chapter 2. Broken Promises. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York City." Mark's voice washed over the cabin like warm lighting, easy and practiced. People unclipped belts they'd just been told to keep fastened, reached for phones, and rehearsed their "so sorry just landed" lies. I stood at the forward galley with my practiced smile and a stomach that felt like it had been left at 10,000 feet. The message still burned on my screen. Stay out of it. Out of what? The catering box? The numbers on the napkin? The camel coat in 3A with the currency sheets and the half smile that said he collected secrets like other men collected watches? Passengers funneled past. A woman thanked me for making the bumpiness less terrifying. A man asked if he could take the blanket as a souvenir. A teenage boy whispered, "First time flying. It felt like magic." And I said it is. Because I needed the reminder. Vanessa hovered by the door like a queen receiving tribute. Her voice was honey to passengers and vinegar to me. "Elena, details," she murmured without looking. "Smile up, chin down. You're beaming like a fan, not an employee." I adjusted. I hated that she was right. The last passenger stepped off. Riley passed with a quiet, "Good first leg." Mark did a small bow to the jet bridge crowd because he couldn't help performing, even when no one asked. "Customs sweep," a man in a dark jacket said, appearing in the galley again as if grown from the floor. Same eyes. Same badge that wasn't ours. My pulse jumped. Vanessa smiled like a press photo. "We're on a tight turn." He held up a gloved hand. 2 minutes. Vanessa held up that same pre-cleared form from Supervisor Trent. He read, exhaled, and stepped back. "Must be nice," he said half to himself. Then he added almost casually, "Watch your manifests. Someone upstairs is watching yours." He left. Vanessa watched him go, the smile cooling off her face like a switch thrown. Then she turned to me. "Brakes 15. Phone's off. We're wheels up in 90. Her gaze flicked to my pocket like she could see the phone through uniform fabric. The warning was a ribbon on a knife. I nodded and retreated. The terminal chattered in a language I used to love, the echo of announcements, the rattle of bags, the caffeinated thrum of a city that never learned to whisper. I ducked into the crew corridor and checked my phone like a teenager with a curfew. A voicemail from David at 2:13 a.m. "Hey, sorry I missed you. Big night. Talk later." A tag on social media I didn't recognize, sent by no one I followed. I tapped, a photo. David. In a bar I knew. Arm around a brunette I did not know. Her cheek pressed to his shoulder. His hand at her waist like it had learned her shape in a language it never spoke to me. The caption from some mutual I hadn't muted fast enough. Power couple energy. A row of heart emojis like confetti across my throat. Under the photo, a comment from Vanessa, a single champagne glass emoji. The air left my lungs like a decompression. For a moment, my body did not know whether to run or faint. I put a hand on the cold tile wall and told my knees a story about staying upright. When the floor steadied, my head did not. I called him. He didn't answer. I texted. "Call me." Nothing. I typed again, deleted. Typed something gentle, deleted. It too, because gentle felt like begging, and I had begged enough in my life. I looked back at the photo. Vanessa's tiny digital toast glittered like glass in a wound. I walked to the crew room because I needed a door to close. Vanessa intercepted me halfway like she'd been tracking my radius. "Watch your hydration," she said brightly, then dropped her voice to a private register. "And watch your distractions." I kept my eyes level. "Noted," she let out. A tiny, delighted sound like someone hearing a joke they'd written themselves. "Oh, Elena, it gets easier. You learn what to ignore. You learn how not to take things personally." "How do you do that?" I asked, surprising us both. "Not take it personally?" She tilted her head, considered, then smiled. "I always take things personally," she said, and walked away. Break ended. We prepped to turn. The ground crew rolled catering aboard with smiles I didn't trust. Vanessa signed the inventory with a flourish I did not admire. I stacked waters and thought of velvet and napkins and men who moved like money and messages that sounded like threats pretending to be advice. As we set the cabin for the next boarding, a TSA officer stepped in with a clipboard and a posture built for standing in thresholds. "Random crew screening," she announced. "Bags, please." I set my tote on the galley counter, palms suddenly damp. Vanessa's mouth made an O shape that did not reach her eyes. The officer checked zippers, swabbed handles, peeked in pockets. Vanessa's tote was immaculate. Lipstick, a novel she would never read, a spare scarf that still had a store tag tucked under the seam. My tote was the opposite: hand cream, an extra pair of tights, a granola bar so battered it had become a condiment. The officer moved on. Then she leaned into an overhead where crew stashed personal coats and tapped a garment bag with 2 knuckles. "Whose?" "Captain's," Vanessa said smoothly. "He keeps a spare jacket." The officer unzipped. Inside was a jacket. And behind the jacket, a box the size of a shoebox, black tape crisscrossed like a casket. "Inventory," Vanessa said, a touch too fast. "Catering misload." The officer looked at her, then at me. It wasn't a question so much as a test. "Will you look away?" I looked down, because that was my job. I hated that it was my job. "Everything okay?" Mark's voice floated from the jet bridge, charming because he didn't know how to be anything else. The officer zipped the bag, wrote a note on her clipboard, and left without ceremony. Vanessa exhaled like she'd been holding the cabin's pressure valve under her tongue. "Back to work," she said. Boarding round 2 began. The orchestra tuned itself again. I poured smiles like coffee. A child asked if we were driving the sky. A man asked if we could turn off the turbulence. I said yes to both because Sometimes the job is lying beautifully. As 3A reappeared, the camel coat, the cologne of expensive decisions, he gave me a look that was not unkind and not particularly human. "Hello again, Miss Nazari," he said, pronouncing it right this time. "Elena," I said automatically. "Elena," he confirmed, then glanced past me to the galley. "New York is a city for eyes," he said softly. "Keep yours open." "Do you always speak in postcards?" I asked before my caution could catch up. He smiled. "Only when I'm on a clock." He took his seat. I took a breath I didn't know I was holding. We pushed back. Vanessa filed her nails with an invisible file called Power. Mark did the welcome. Riley did the math. The sky took us back because it always did, until one day it didn't. Service settled into its rhythm, which is to say it demanded everything and rewarded you with a thank you once per row if you were lucky. I didn't spill, I didn't rattle, I didn't breathe unless I had to. And then mid-cabin, Vanessa decided to teach me a lesson. Ms. 9D asked for sparkling. "You brought her still," she announced, loud enough for 9D and 9C and maybe half. The row behind to hear. She asked for still," I said carefully. Vanessa's lips widened. "We serve what passengers mean, not what they say. Fix it." I swallowed the heat that rose, took the bottle, replaced it with the other, and apologized to a woman who blinked at me like I was speaking Esperanto. Vanessa's point was not water. It was hierarchy. Riley passed on his way to the lav and paused just long enough to ask, "You okay?" "Peachy," I said, brighter than I felt. His voice dropped a thread. "You don't imagine it," he said without looking at Vanessa. "Some things you're feeling, they're real." "Which things?" I asked. He glanced at the forward galley, where the catering box had reappeared for the third time today, like a trick in a cheap magic show. "The ones you can prove," he said, and moved on. We were halfway over Pennsylvania when the turbulence came back, the kind that shakes thoughts out of heads and coffee out of cups. I braced the cart. Eyes closed, a man held a crucifix like a lifeline. A baby screamed an area only babies know. Vanessa smiled like she had ordered the weather and it had obeyed. Between bumps, I ducked to the jump seat and checked my phone because I am human and heartbreak is an itch. A new message. Not from David. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Same number, same threat. No punctuation this time, like a heartbeat that forgot to stop. My thumb hovered over block. I didn't press. Instead I typed back, "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Someone who doesn't want to watch you get hurt." I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. Then I slid the phone away because duty has a way of dragging you back by the collar. By decent, the plane had quieted. The city below glowed like circuitry. As we prepped the cabin, Vanessa handed me a stack of customs cards for practice. I distributed them row by row, and when I reached 3A, he took one and a pen, then returned both untouched. "Paper trails are for people who plan to be caught," he said mildly. "Does anyone plan that?" I asked. "The arrogant do," he replied. "They don't believe the ground will ever meet them." We touched down smoother than we took off. Applause flittered again. I did the checks, the thanks, the smile that had learned new muscles in 12 hours. At the door, 3A paused. "You learn quickly," he said. "At what?" I asked. "At pretending not to see," he said, and stepped into the jet bridge, swallowed by New York for the second time today. When the last passenger left, I sagged against the galley wall for half a second that felt like 5 minutes. Vanessa breezed in with her clipboard and her victory perfume. "Hotel assignments are posted," she sang. "We're at the Midtown, on 46th. Curfew at 11. No, extracurriculars." "Understood," I said. "Vanessa," she arched an eyebrow. I swallowed the 100 questions I wanted to pour into the space between us like gasoline. I chose one that sounded like safety. Do you like the job? She watched me for a long moment, as if deciding which mask to wear. Then she said, "Simply, I like winning," and swept out. The midtown room was a box with good drapes and a view of a brick wall that had seen things. I set my tote down, locked the deadbolt, put my forehead against the glass, and let the city hum through my skin until my bones found their normal. Then I called David again. This time he answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said, voice low, like he was alone and lying about it. "I was just going to call you." "Who is she?" I asked, skipping the preface, the politeness, the act. He sighed. "Elena, don't do this." "Don't do what?" "Ask why my fiancé is featured in a post with a stranger and 15 heart emojis?" "It's a friend," he said. "It's nothing." "She had your ring hand in her hand." He laughed. "God, you're dramatic." The word detonated. Of every insult a person can hand you, dramatic is the one that makes your own brain betray you. "I had a day," I said, voice thin. "Just say what's true, David, please." Silence. Then, "You're never here," he said. "You chose this job. I can't live my life around your schedule." "My schedule," I repeated, because sometimes you have to taste a sentence to believe it. "I've got to run," he added. "We'll talk when you're back." The line clicked. I stared at the phone until it looked like an object I'd never owned. Then I put it down on the nightstand very carefully, as if it were a fragile thing I still respected. The first sob surprised me. The second did not. I cried into the pillow, into the carpet when sitting wasn't enough, into the shower when noise felt safer than quiet. I cried for my mother, who never got to see me fly. I cried for the girl who wanted the sky to save her. I cried for the woman learning that the sky has its own predators. When the tears emptied, something else took their place. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. The feeling you get when a seatbelt clicks in, when a door seals, when a checklist reaches the final line and you sign with a hand that understands the weight of ink. My phone lit my wet face with a new text. "Unknown number. You want to stop them?" I stared. Typed. "Stop who?" Dots. "The ones using you. Using the plane. Using him." My heart kicked. "Who are you?" Dots. Then a single word. "Hail." A. I sat up. All the air in the room changed temperature. Another text. "Meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m. Bryant. Park. Black coat, red scarf. Bring no one. Bring nothing." I typed and erased 3 responses before sending, "Why me?" A pause that lasted long enough to become a promise. "Because you still care about the rules," Hale wrote, "and you haven't learned how to break them without breaking yourself. Yet." I put the phone down. The city's hum layered with the AC's steady breath. A siren wrote a red line across the night. Somewhere downstairs, a door slammed like a punctuation mark that finally chose itself. I lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling, and counted the moments between my heartbeat and the hotel's, between what I thought today would be, and what it had become. Betrayal. A velvet box, a napkin of numbers, a warning, a man who collected secrets, a pilot who smiled too much, a senior attendant who loved to win, and me, Elena Nazari, rookie in a Navy uniform that still smelled like the formality that came with the package. I closed my eyes and heard my mother again. "One day, Elena, you'll fly above all of this." I opened them and whispered into the dark. "I won't fly above it, Mama. I'm going to fly through it." Outside, somewhere beyond my brick wall, New York didn't sleep. Neither did I. Not really. At 9:42 a.m., I would walk into Bryant Park in a black coat and a red scarf and sit where the light cut the benches into stripes, and a man named Hale would tell me what I already suspected, that the sky was being used as a road for things that didn't want names. He would tell me I was already in it, whether I wanted to be or not. For now, I pressed my palm to my chest to feel the proof that I was here, that I was still mine. Then I set a $9 wake-up, and I waited for morning, the way a plane waits on an active runway, loaded, humming, ready to accelerate the second someone clears me for takeoff. Bryant Park in winter feels like the world's stage set. Frost clinging to bare branches, steam curling from subway grates, a patchwork of commuters, tourists, and ghosts rushing through the same rectangle of city. I sat on a bench under a sky. That was all steel and impatience. Black coat, red scarf. Just as he asked. My palms sweated in my gloves as if they hadn't gotten the memo that New York was frozen. At exactly 10 Gauss, Hale arrived. No camel coat this time. Just a simple black jacket, wool cap, hands empty. He blended in so easily I almost doubted it was him, until those eyes locked onto me. The same sharp ones that had watched me on the flight like I was more than a rookie balancing a tray of drinks. "You came," he said, sitting without ceremony. "I shouldn't have." My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. "If Vanessa finds out—" "She already suspects you," Hale cut in, his voice steady as winter concrete. "But that's not your biggest problem." I blinked. "Then what is?" He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Do you know what was in that catering box you almost opened?" I shook my head. "Diamonds. Smuggled through meal carts because no one checks what's hidden beneath heat trays. Vanessa runs the line. Mark guarantees smooth paperwork. Customs officers take their cut." My mouth went dry. "And you?" He smiled, but it was the kind that never touched eyes. "I'm here because their network has been bleeding international flights for years. I follow trails. Vanessa didn't expect a rookie to notice, which makes you dangerous." I tried to laugh, but it caught. "I'm not dangerous. Don't say just a flight attendant." His tone sharpened. "The woman who survives in shadows no one else notices, she's the most dangerous of all." The words rooted in me, frightening and electric. "Why me?" I whispered. "Because you're still clean. They haven't dirtied you yet. And because your fiancé." He paused, studying me. "David, isn't it? He's already part of this." I froze. "What?" Hale reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded paper. My breath stopped when I saw it. David's name. Next to Vanessa's, next to amounts that made my rent look like pocket change. "He launders small sums for them," Hale said. "Transfers through shell accounts. Probably told himself it was just a side hustle." My stomach turned. David. The man I wanted to marry. The man who kissed me goodbye with promises of forever. His betrayal didn't just break me. It tied me to them like a shackle. "No," I whispered. "You're wrong." "Check his phone," Hale said, standing. "Check his laptop. You'll see." He started to walk away, then looked back. "And when you do, you'll have to decide. Stay blind like the rest. Or fight." That night, in my Midtown hotel room, I did what he said. David hadn't logged out of his email on the laptop he let me borrow sometimes. My hands shook as I typed his password. My birthday. The inbox opened like a trap. Transfers. Messages. Vanessa's name in shorthand. Notes about shipments disguised as catering orders. My eyes blurred. I wanted it to be a mistake, a coincidence. But every word drove the knife deeper. He wasn't distracted because he was stressed. He wasn't busy. He was in bed with them, maybe literally with that brunette in the photo, definitely with Vanessa's dirty empire. I slammed the laptop. Shut so hard the lamp rattled. A text buzzed instantly on my phone. "Unknown number." "You saw it." My breath hitched. Hale again. Watching me? I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into the bathroom, stared at my reflection. My uniform hung on the door like a question. I thought of my mother's voice, of being shoved down by life over and over. I thought of Vanessa's smirk, of Mark's arrogance, of David's lies. And then, for the first time, I didn't cry. Planned. 2 days later, we flew out again. Same crew, same routes. Vanessa was radiant, as if cruelty fed her. Mark was smug. Riley gave me a look, quiet, knowing, like he could hear the gears turning inside me. Service carts rattled. Passengers buzzed, but this time I wasn't fumbling. I was watching, counting, noticing how Vanessa tapped 3 times on the catering box before locking it, how Mark carried a small envelope to the cockpit, slipped it under his flight log, how customs waved us through when her clipboard appeared, every move a code, every smile a mask, and I was done playing baggage. That night, in the dark of my room, I typed a message to Hale. I want in. The reply came in seconds. Good, because turbulence is coming, and they won't survive it. The cabin lights dimmed to midnight blue as we crossed the Atlantic, the hum of the engines steady like a secret heartbeat. Passengers dozed, earbuds in, neck pillows tilting heads at odd angles. To them, it was another flight. To me, it was war disguised as service. I moved like a shadow through the aisle, uniform crisp, smile intact. But underneath, every step, every gesture, was sharpened. Tonight wasn't about coffee or seatbelts. Tonight was about ending this. Hale's words, echoed in my head, turbulence is coming, and they won't survive it. The setup Vanessa was in her element, gliding between business class seats like a queen surveying her court. Mark was locked in the cockpit, his voice occasionally booming over the intercom with a smugness only he could sustain. Riley kept his eyes on instruments, but when I caught his glance, there was the faintest nod. He knew. He was with me. I'd been patient, waiting, watching, and now I was ready. When the catering carts rolled into the galley, I swapped them like a magician. In the shadows, I lifted Vanessa's velvet-lined box, the one she thought untouchable, and slid it into Mark's garment bag in the cockpit closet. My pulse roared, my fingers slick, but I kept my movement steady. Every second felt like a scream, but no one saw. Then I tucked the duplicate keycard Hale had given me into Vanessa's purse, slipping it between lipsticks. It was a breadcrumb, trail, one that would lead straight to both of them. By the time the seatbelt sign pinged on for descent into JFK, the trap was set. The strike at customs, the line of weary passengers shuffled forward. Vanessa stood tall, clipboard ready, Mark behind her with that easy grin. Riley lingered near the door, unusually tense. And me? I was calm. Too calm. The officer who had randomly checked us before stepped forward again. But this time, he wasn't casual. He was flanked by 2 more agents, his eyes locked on Mark. Captain Fleming, we'll need to search your luggage. The smile faltered. Just slightly. Is there a problem? The officer unzipped the garment bag. The velvet box gleamed under fluorescent lights, its lid lifting like a coffin. Diamonds spilled inside, catching every cruel beam. The air fractured. Passengers craned necks. Crew froze. What? This isn't mine, Mark barked, but the words came out strangled. Then the second officer turned to Vanessa. Ma'am, this was found in your handbag. He held up the keycard, her face drained. For once, she had no script. The terminal buzzed with whispers. Phones lifted, recording. The mighty crew undone not by turbulence, but by truth. The betrayal complete. David was waiting outside security, exactly as Hale had promised. He rushed forward, eyes wide, voice pitching into desperation. Elena, this isn't what it looks like. I didn't speak. I pulled out the folded papers Hale had slipped me earlier. Proof of his transfers, every filthy dollar washed through Vanessa's network. I held them like a mirror. His face cracked. Elena, please. But I wasn't his Elena anymore. You made me believe you were my anchor, I said, voice shaking but clear. But you were just another storm. I handed the papers to the officers. David's protest dissolved into handcuffs. The payoff hours later, I sat in the terminal, the chaos finally behind me. Vanessa, Mark, and David, all taken. Their empire collapsed mid-flight, undone by the rookie they dismissed as baggage. Riley approached, coffee in hand. You okay? I exhaled, a sound that felt like years leaving my chest. For the first time, yes. He sat beside me, quiet, present. No smirk, no superiority. Just company. On the departure board, flights flickered. Paris, Tokyo, Dubai. The world was suddenly wider than betrayal, brighter than fear. I touched the wings on my lapel. They weren't heavy anymore. They thought turbulence would break. Me, I whispered. But I learned to fly through the storm and leave them grounded. This was Broken Vows Chronicles. If this story gave you chills, make sure to subscribe and share where you're watching from, because sometimes the worst turbulence isn't in the sky, it's in the people you trust the most. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply learning how to fly without them.